nino man. Maaabot lahat ng iyong inaasam. Kasipagan ng sagot, salat ka man sa kayamanan. Buksan ng pahina ng mga aklat ng karunungan. Edukasyon ating kailangan, kamamangan ating iwanan. Please!
Ating lilipalin ang himbawangin.
Ating tanawin
Bagong pag-asa ay muling tatanawin.
kinabukasan pagbibayin. Pilitin mo gawin.
Puspos ang pagsisikap.
Pag-asa ay yakapin.
Isang
Edukasyon ang kayamanan ng kahit nino man. Isang pangarap ang tutupad, pagsisikapan ng lahat.
puspos ang pagsisikap.
Kaya mo yun, kaibigan.
Mabubuo isang pangarap.
Good Tuesday afternoon to all our live viewers in all platforms of DepEd from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And welcome to the second part of our webinar series on integrating antimicrobial resistance concepts and awareness in basic education classrooms. Joining us in this Zoom platform are our division and regional supervisors. And we are also being currently watched by teachers all over the country via DepEd Philippines Facebook page, DepEd Tayo, and DepEd YouTube channel. Yesterday, we focused on teaching AMR concepts and awareness in teaching elementary students. For this afternoon, we will be focusing on the basics of AMR and how they can be taught to our high school learners so that our teachers can effectively and seamlessly integrate its concepts in classroom discussions and assessments. We are so grateful to all the field offices who participated to our contest and disseminated the webinar information to their respective teachers. Good day to our Zoom participants and to our almost 532 Facebook Live viewers. We will be announcing details of the contest mechanics and contest winners after this webinar. Please continue to share and react on this webinar. And here with you is Wanimilane N. Santos, Senior Education Program Specialist of the Bureau of Learning Delivery, Teaching and Learning Division. But before we proceed to our topic, let's have some check-in activity or some energizer. This game is called Guess the Picture, and I'm sure you're all excited to participate in this activity. It is a very simple one. We will be showing you pictures and you have to guess the word. For our Zoom participants, you may use the Zoom chat box, and for our Facebook Live participants, we will be looking at your answers through the comment section. So are you ready? Good afternoon as well to all our live viewers in Facebook. They are already excited to participate in the activity. I am inviting all our participants to please actively participate and share your answers again using the comment section or the Zoom chat box if you are in our Zoom meeting room. So let's now start. This is our first picture. What do you think is this one? Or what do you think is the word? Let's see if our Facebook Live viewers can get this one correctly. How about our Zoom participants? You may raise your hand or you may also unmute if you know the answer. What do you think is the answer? All right, I think meron na po sa ating mga Facebook Live participants ang nakakuha ng sagot. And the answer is antibiotics. So, marami po ang sumagot ng capsule, but the correct answer po is antibiotics. Ma'am Belen of Region 6, Sipalay City, you got the correct answer. Congratulations po. And Ma'am Edna, sabi ni Ma'am Edna, sayang, malapit na sana, medicine capsule. Si Ma'am Luisa Elipan po got this one correctly and the answer is antibiotics. Congratulations po. I know that was quite tricky as there could be multiple answers, but let's see if you could guess the second one right. Let's show the second picture. What do you think is the second picture? What do you think is this one? Meron na po sa ating Zoom na nakasagot. How about our Facebook Live viewers? Sino po kaya ang makakasagot ng tama? Okay. So si Ma'am Mirasol po in our Zoom platform has gotten the correct answer. And that's right po. The answer is bacteria. So let's see. Sa atin pong namang mga Zoom participants, ang nakakuha po ng sagot na nauna ay si Ma'am Mirasol. But let's take a look at our Facebook Live viewers. Si Ma'am Amor Tubio and also si Sir Melvin Arellano, medyo malapit ang kanyang sagot, microorganisms. Ma'am Arlene Munda as well got the correct answer. The answer po is bacteria. Ganun pala ang itsura ng bacteria in close-up, no? And let's have the last one, the last picture for this activity. Ito, medyo mahirap. Nako, pero I'm sure that our science supervisors and teachers are very much familiar with this one. Evolution, medyo malapit naman. It starts with letter M, just like my name, Milane. What do you think is the answer? Si Ma'am Daisy, medyo malapit na rin po. Daisy Masangkay, variant, ano pa po kaya? Yon, ang galing ni Ma'am Mirasol. Nalaman niya kaagad or nakuha niya po kaagad. The answer is mutation. How about the other participants po in Facebook Live? Tingnan nga po natin kung may nakakuha. Meron po malapit kanina, variation or antibodies. Hindi rin po. The correct answer po is mutation. So some strains of bacteria have already evolved to resist antibiotics because of mutation. They have already mutated and they are already called superbugs once that happens. That was quite difficult, but I'm sure that all of you already have a prior knowledge on what we will be discussing this afternoon. So that was the last picture, and congratulations to those who got this one right. And I'm sure that for the next activities of our Bureau of the DepEd, you will be getting the correct answers in the check-in activity correctly already. So now let us dig deeper on how the complex concepts of antimicrobial resistance can be integrated in classroom discussions and assessments, particularly for our a little bit older learners or to our junior and senior high school learners, sa mga medyo malalaki na. Yesterday, we tackled about how to integrate it in discussions with the younger learners or with the elementary, but this time, let's take a look at how we can integrate AMR in our high school classrooms. So before I pass the floor to our first competent resource speaker, we remind our participants to please type in your questions. If you are in Zoom, you may use the Zoom chat box. And if you are watching via Facebook Live, you may also use the comment section to type in your queries or your questions. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our very competent first speaker who will tackle the basics of antimicrobial resistance. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Dr. Regina P. Berba, Chair of the National Antimicrobial Stewardship Steering Committee of the Department of Health. Good afternoon po, Dr. Berba.
Hello, good afternoon. Share ko muna. Okay. Okay na ba?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm now sharing. Oh, okay. Okay, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Yan, good afternoon everyone. So ako po si Dr. Berba, and as Ma'am Elaine said, I'm part po of the group that's trying to just push the concept of antimicrobial resistance strategies and control. So 2 weeks ago po, nagkaroon tayo, we celebrated the WOW, World Antimicrobial Awareness Week. And so that you know, every year, mark it in your calendar that it will be celebrated every November 18 to 24. Okay? So ako po ay isa ring teacher. So sa UP College of Medicine, we teach medical students. And minsan mahirap po siya talaga ituro. So ang approach namin today is to just give you teachers, at least for my part, some basic idea of what the concept of AMR is. So for 2021, the theme of the WOW, or the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, is hashtag spread awareness, stop resistance. And in Filipino, we translated that to hashtag kaalaman ay dagdagan, AMR sa gitna ng pandemya ay labanan. So ito po yung reason kung bakit talagang parang napakahalaga na nandito po kayo today. And thank you and congratulations to all of you who are here in the audience, because the next steps that DepEd will take related to AMR control is going to be very important for us during our generation and all the future generations to come. Okay, so ano ba tong concept ng AMR or antimicrobial resistance? No? Parang naglalag ang aking slides. Yan. Okay, so AMR is the short word for the acronym for antimicrobial resistance. So usually, na-correlate natin to sa word called antibiotic. Pero yung antimicrobial, mas madami yon. So antibiotic usually ginagamit natin yung gamot para sa bacteria. Tapos meron ring antifungal para labanan yung mga fungi. Meron ring antiviral at antiparasitic. Pero ang overall concept ng AMR is kung ano man yung bug na yon, yung bacteria, virus, fungi, or parasite, or we call them together as microorganism na nagkakos ng infection, kung ano man sila, at binigyan mo sila ng gamot na supposedly papatayin na sila or i-control, hindi na yun nangyayari kasi naging resistant na sila. So that's called AMR. In our colloquial lingo, parang nagiging immune na sila. Ayaw na umubra ng mga gamot. So AMR is when bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites change over time. Di ba isa sa mga tanong kanina, ang sagot, evolution, mutation, and to the point na they no longer respond to medicines, making these infections very difficult to treat. And minsan, hindi muna nga sila matreat. So, nagsasuccumb to death na yung mga kawawang mga pasyente who would have this very resistant organisms, or tinatawag natin sa healthcare, multi-drug resistant, or sa usual mga magazines na nakikita natin, superbugs, no? So talagang pwedeng by natural selection, 'di ba? Parang yung ating mga variants ngayon ng COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 virus, nag-mutate sila, nag-evolution because of the rapid multiplication, nag-change sila. So in the end, parang mas malakas na talaga sila, no? They have the capacity to stop whatever it is we're trying to give to control them. So yan more or less ang parang mas madali sigurong maintindihan na concept ng AMR. Okay. And then we're also flooded kasi very interested po talaga yung buong world on this phenomenon, no? Antibiotics are losing their power, tapos yan, are we seeing the end of the miracle drugs? Yan po yung mga parang lumalabas. They're called superbugs or killer microbes, no? So kailangan we try to overcome threat pa lang to. Usually nakikita na natin sila pero ayaw na natin dumating sa point na ma-overwhelm na tayo lahat doon. So going back to history, we remember that it was Sir Alexander Fleming and his team who discovered the miracle drug, di ba? Naging miracle drug of antibiotics. Yung penicillin, yung very first na antibiotic na na-discover, 1940s to, sa gitna ng war. So at that time, maraming namamatay kasi walang panggamot. And when penicillin was discovered, you see in this graph na bumaba na yung mga death rates, mortality rates. Tapos nag-increase yung life expectancy. Humaba yung buhay ng mga tao kasi meron ng panggamot sa mga infections. But also during that period, nung na-discover na yung antibiotics, na-discover na rin yung concept ng resistance. So even Sir Alexander Fleming predicted na, if people don't use antibiotics wisely, these bugs will learn how to overcome the power of antibiotics. So yun na nga nangyari sa atin. So over time, yan. So even when we were seeing, kunyari, yan. Okay. So ito, yung naka-italicize here, it's called Staphylococcus aureus. Ito po yung bacteria that is the most common cause of the wound infection. So nung time na yon, isa siya sa pinakamahalagang bacteria. So the development of penicillin was important kasi it was a way of overcoming these wound infections. At the time of the war, na maraming mga soldiers nagkakaroon ng wound infections, tapos eventually either na-amputate sila or namamatay sila because of this. Napakahalaga na they discovered penicillin. But you would see along the way, through the years, kahit na we discover new and new antibiotics against the bug called Staphylococcus aureus, panay nagiging resistant. No? Natututo yung Staph aureus i-overcome yung power ng antibacterial na yon. And that's the same for almost all antibiotics. So listen to this one.
Hi there. Did you know that 70 years ago, penicillin saved countless lives in World War II? Fast forward to the 21st century, and the chief doctor in the UK calls for antimicrobial resistance to be put on the National Risk Register and be taken seriously. And the US government describes antimicrobial resistance as one of our most serious health threats. In Canada, outbreaks of superbugs frequently make headlines because they kill patients. Antimicrobial resistance isn't a new phenomenon. All germs have the ability to develop resistance. But the more drug exposure there is, the faster resistance develops in people, animals, and agriculture. We now face infections that are resistant to many, if not all, of our available drugs, and there is very little to look forward to in the antibiotic development pipeline. Since 2010, only 3 new antimicrobials have been approved for use in Canada. This means that we must manage these precious resources more wisely, like preserving clean drinking water or halting global warming. Inappropriate or unnecessary use of antimicrobials is often cited as up to 50%. Misuse of antimicrobials is risky to patients. It can increase mortality, time spent in hospital, and lead to collateral damage, such as a new infection with another bug, like C. difficile, a germ that causes diarrhea in most, but may cause serious or fatal infection in others. Using antimicrobials appropriately will not only help preserve our antibiotics, but will also improve patient outcomes and patient safety. Everyone wants to do the best thing for their patient. Sometimes that feels like wanting to give the strongest, broadest spectrum antibiotic. But we need to ask, is that really the best thing, not just for this patient, but the patients in the global community? We need to carefully think about why we are giving an antibiotic, what drug we choose, and how we're using it, dose and duration of therapy. We are falling behind the curve with the prevalence of multi-drug resistant organisms and the lack of new and innovative antimicrobials. Antimicrobial stewardship is just one facet in the efforts to improve outcomes among patients with infections and reduce the incidence of resistance. Everyone plays an important role as good antimicrobial stewards.
Yun. Okay. So maybe tinatanong nyo sa mind nyo, eh hindi naman ako doktor. So paano naman na I am part of this campaign, ano? So kasi we now feel na it's really just not being a problem of doctors, patients, human health, no? Kasi problem na natin to lahat. Okay? So when we started to look at AMR, ano ba yung mga frequent causes? So of course, physicians are always taught not to overprescribe. Pero sometimes, hindi lang physicians yung problem. Minsan din, patients not finishing their treatment. Let's say they're already feeling better after 3 days. Yan, tapos mag-stop na sila. So maybe sometimes, kayo being teachers may have been patients. So kailangan aware tayo na kahit na we feel better already, we finish the treatment that was prescribed to us. Or maybe may kilala tayo na mga naging pasyente. So alam nyo naman, being teachers, people really listen to you. So mahalaga as educators na we also teach these concepts to other people in our setting, whether in our family, in our communities, in our school, in our workplaces, lahat yon. Overuse of antibiotics, poor infection control, lack of hygiene and poor sanitation. Again, itong lack of hygiene and poor sanitation, parang napakalaking role ng teachers also teaching our youth from young age pa. Paano ba alagaan yung sarili natin para hindi tayo magka-infection. So lahat po ito, nakikita natin na malaking role of other people, other professions, other than yung nasa healthcare. Now, to further trying to understand kung ano yung ibig sabihin ng AMR, look at these 2 plates. So these are what we see in the microbiology lab. So bawat plate po na to, meron niyang bacteria. So tapos yung mga bilog na puti, those are antibiotic discs, no? So when we plant antibiotic disc into a culture na puro bacteria, usually pag uubra yung antibiotic at ipapatayin niya yung bacteria, you would see magki-clear up kasi mamamatay yung bacteria. So magkakaroon ng zone of clearing. And that was how it was in 2009. Around the antibiotic disc, there's a really nice large circles of clearing telling us that these antibiotics work. But 1 decade later in 2019, the same photo, the same setup, kita nyo wala nang clearing kasi resistant na yung bacteria that's in that plate. Kahit lagyan mo ng malalakas na antibiotics, di na sila namamatay. Now, there was this very nice Harvard University experiment and they tried to show us ano ba ibig sabihin ng AMR? How can we show it better to people who do not really work in the lab? So they made a giant plate, yung kaninang bilog, ginawa nilang malaking plate sa floor and then they put bacteria at the edges. Tapos yung nilagay nilang mga bawat segment of that agar plate, they put different concentrations of the antibiotic. The closer you are to the center, the stronger, mas malakas, more potent yung antibiotic, no? So from 3, naging 30, naging 300, naging 3,000 yung strength ng mga antibiotics. And look at what they try to do. So, yan. Nag-implant sila ng E. coli sa bawat dulo ng agar plate. And you would see the bacteria moving, no? They're multiplying very fast. Tapos, overcome nila, dadating sila sa dulo. Tapos magsa-stop sila just for a few seconds. Tapos matututunan nila to strengthen themselves and overcome the increased antibiotic concentration. So can you imagine all of these bacteria transforming, evolving into a really super bugs, so that in the end, there were over 200 mutations in just 12 days. This bacteria could be so intelligent, so powerful, that if we don't take care and address this situation, lives, many lives will be lost by 2050. There's a forecast na if we don't shift our track, there will be so much death. Millions and millions of people will die from this problem kasi wala nang panggamot sa mga infections. So we need to start acting today. Ito po yung mga estimates. By 2050 daw, every 45 seconds may mamamatay across the world from a bacteria which is resistant to antibiotics. It's really a very scary forecast. That's why we really need to act on it. And WHO itself said it's one of the biggest threat to our condition right now. Tapos nagkaroon pa ng COVID-19. So parang dual health threat na siya talaga. Okay, so here in the Philippines, how did we respond, or how are we responding to AMR? Okay, so even if I'm trying to talk to you today in 2021, and in a few weeks, 2022 na, the Philippines has started to act on this years ago. So etong panahon pa to ni President Noynoy Aquino, nagka-AO number 42 na. And since that time, 2015, we have been trying to get our acts together so that we will be able to address this in a national action plan. So actually, nagka-first national action plan, you see here in the middle, the Philippine Action Plan to combat AMR hanggang 2018. Tapos actually, marami na nga siyang na-achievements na dineclare at dinocument. Okay, so these are some of the achievements. So that such that just that you know, hindi na to bagong-bago ha. So and we've able to identify the drivers, yun nga mga doktor, mga patients, mga industry, and we've been trying to really address them and find the solutions for them. Tapos parang we are moving forward naman. One of the more important achievements, I think, is the no prescription, no dispensing policy. So, kayo po siguro baka minsan nagagalit kayo, bakit hindi ako pinagbebentahan ng antibiotic? Kailangan ko na siya. Yun, di ba? Minsan pumunta tayo sa drugstore, tapos gusto natin bumili ng, let's say, amoxicillin. Tapos ayaw tayo pagbilhan ng pharmacist kasi we didn't have a prescription. But that is a very powerful strategy po na dapat lahat ng antibiotics. So wag na kayo masyado magalit sa pharmacist or sa owner ng drugstore kasi yun po yung tamang paraan. All our antibiotics must have a prescription. Okay. Tapos the other big achievement is the tawag antimicrobial stewardship training. So describe ko lang po yun ng a little bit more later. Pero just that you know, just before the COVID-19 happened in 2019, naka-launch na by the strong forces of majority of which was from the Department of Health, yung second National Action Plan, which will hold true till 2023. So kasama na po kayo dyan sa plan na yan. Yan na nga kasi one of the mission of this Philippine National Action Plan is to implement an integrated, comprehensive, and sustainable response. And that response includes na teachers, the youth, educators, the academe, lahat po para ma-reach natin itong mga indicators of success. Okay? So, nandun po kayo dito sa last strategy, improve awareness about AMR through good communication and education. Okay? So, some of the big AMR solutions are really lowering demand for antimicrobials and reducing unnecessary use. And we could only do this by good public awareness and good education. Okay. Yan. So, isa rin dun ay siguro very timely rin to na sinasabi namin, increasing coverage of vaccine can reduce antibiotic use. So for example, ngayon, uso yung COVID-19 vaccine. The more of us getting vaccinated against the SARS-CoV-2, the less likely siguro tayo mangangailangan ng antibiotics in the future. Ganun din for all other vaccines, no? The more we use the measles vaccine, the hepatitis B vaccines, and all of those, the less likely we will need antibiotics. Kasi baka hindi na tayo magkasakit. Yun yung premise dyan. Tapos the other solution is use of diagnostics. No? Ibig sabihin po, pagka kayo ay may nararamdaman, magandang magkonsulta para we can diagnose it well using the right diagnostics. For example, yung mga RT-PCR test. So pagka meron kang parang feel mo ay baka COVID siya, mas maganda na pumunta na po tayo sa LGU natin para tayo ay magawa ng RT-PCR test early. Para sa ganun, alam na natin kung meron tayong sakit or wala. At mabigyan na siya ng tamang mga gamot. So, antimicrobial stewardship is in bold here, it's a commitment. So pagka nag-umpisa po tayo today, sana tuloy-tuloy po. It's a commitment to always use antibiotics appropriately and safely, and that we use it when we need it. So sa mga doktor, sinasabi namin, tama ba yung prescription mo, right antibiotic, right dose, right route, right duration. At sana in time lahat tayo, pag gumagamit tayo ng antibiotics, tama dahil kailangan natin. No? So, all of this matters kasi good AMS or antimicrobial stewardship leads to better patient care. So, mas madaming nabubuhay ng mga pasyente. Mas less yung adverse events, so mas less yung complications, mas less yung mga difficulties, allergies related to antibiotics. Of course, less yung cost at less din ang resistance. So, we've been training many hospitals. So, if you go to any health facility now, most of them or almost all of them will have an AMS team. Okay? So parang medyo na-set na namin yung stage na pag pumunta ka sa ospital, more likely than not, marunong na yung ating mga doktor, mga nurses, mga pharmacists ng tamang paggamit ng antibiotic. Okay. Pero nagka-COVID So natigil ba yung AMS? Actually, very good nga po yung response ng Department of Health because they were very quickly able to recalibrate the AMS program despite the pandemic. So from dati kasi pag nagte-train kami, nag-workshop, 'di ba? Kapag nag-workshop tayo pre-pandemic, nandun tayo sa isang hotel, Tapos 4 days, tuloy-tuloy, nag-uusap. We form groups. We work on the activities of the workshop and then we report. So hindi na pwede yun ngayon. So we actually shifted the entire AMS program into a virtual network. So tuloy-tuloy pa rin. So parang ang message po dito ay kahit na nagka-COVID-19 and we're in a different setup, pwede pa rin magturo ng AMS. Now, beyond all of that, what can each of us, each of you, do to fight AMR? Number one talaga na ina-ask help namin from all of you is to help prevent infections. It could be as simple as teaching our students good hand hygiene. Paano ba maghugas ng kamay? Paano ba gumamit ng alcohol? Kailan ba ito kailangan? Tapos, improve antimicrobial prescribing and use through AMS. Yun nga po, kung meron kayong mga, kayo mismo, kung gumagamit kayo ng antibiotic, nabigyan kayo ng prescription, gamitin ng tama. Kasi syempre, being teachers, people also around you watch you and they follow you. And then keep ourselves updated and keep on teaching other people. So again, preventing infections will lead to less antibiotic that needs to be used. Okay? So, tapos, turuan natin ang ating mga estudyante panatiling malakas ang kanilang mga sarili. Parang panay natin sinasabi sa kanila, pag malusog sila, mas less likely sila ma-attack ng mga germs, no? Labanan ang mga mikrobyo. Pwedeng isa sa mga paraan ay good diet, 'di ba? Exercise, a lot of sleep, at saka mga bakuna. Tapos, early on, baka maganda rin na we teach them na panay sundan ang payo ng mga doktor at huwag magdoktor-doktoran. Pati po kahapon tinanong, paano yung mga magulang? Ganun din. Siyempre yung mga magulang nakikinig rin po sa mga teacher ng kanilang mga anak. So, pwede natin i-spread through some maybe activities related pag may mga parent-teachers, mga ganun, or other similar activities na hindi lahat ng sakit kailangan ng antibiotic. Diba? Kunyari yung mga sipon-sipon, hindi naman nun kailangan ng amoxicillin or coamoxiclav or mas malakas pang gamot. So magkonsulta, turuan natin ang ating mga estudyante na magkonsulta sa mga doktor kung meron silang nararamdaman at huwag mag-self-prescribe. Huwag mag-recycle, huwag mag-order ng antibiotic sa internet kasi hindi po yun nire-recommend. At saka yun, wag tayo makipag no negotiations with the bacteria. Kailangan puksain natin sila kaagad. Okay. So marami pong yung next slides are just to tell you na kung maglo-launch na po kayo ng mga inyong pagtuturo sa mga kabataan, marami po talagang maraming materials sa internet, lalo na from World Health Organization. They look something like this. Pwedeng in English. Tapos meron rin po na from different sites. Yan po. Para pwedeng i-match dun sa age nung tinuturuan nyo. Kung ano yung level of information you think will be good for them. Tapos, ito po. Pwede rin sa DOH, kung marami rin pong in various dialects, like Filipino and other dialects na nasa DOH. So, rich po ang ating resources. So, yung update lang na very recently, so medyo new concept pa siya, na when we talk about AMR or antimicrobial resistance, hindi na tayo human health lang. Kasi hindi naman gumagamit ng antibiotics ay mga tao lang. No? So, beyond people, there's really a lot of different flow charts or flow mechanisms that antimicrobials find their way. So, pwedeng animals, pwedeng nga napupunta sa environment, pwedeng nagiging part siya ng industry. So, we need to like take a broader framework of all of these AMR determinants. No? So, pag nagdi-discuss tayo, yun nga po, lalo na kung siguro nandun kayo sa part of the country na medyo malapit sa mga animal industry, animal health, yan. So, we want to also give that kind of advocacy na alagaan natin yung environment natin kasi we're all in just one global community. No? So what happens to one part, like here, yan, hindi na siya isolated. Lahat yan magkakaduktong, no? So let's say, yung tubig na umaagos sa isang ilog, san yung ibang parts nun? San galing? Yan. So actually, meron nga kaming gagawing study looking at the water of Laguna de Bay. Tapos naku-curious kami kung ano yung bacteria at kung ano yung resistance na makikita namin dun sa mga bacteria dun sa Laguna de Bay. Kasi nakikita nga na repository siya ng maraming other things around that area. Yun. So, medyo catchword yung One Health eh. One Health must be sort of clear din sa atin na it's a collaboration. It's a collaborative effort of multiple health scientists, health science professions to attain optimal health for people, domestic animals, plants, and our environment. So, ganun na yung approach natin. No? So, when we talk about antimicrobial resistance, we also think about other groups other than yung gumagamit mainly ng mga tao. Pwede ring baka be vigilant about the farms around you, the food that we eat, yan. The plants, the fertilizers that we use. Yan. Okay. Okay, and the same approach has been taken by the WHO. So naging One Health na rin ang kanilang naging response to AMR. No? So that actually, pag tinanong, ano ba yung drivers? Who are the drivers of AMR in your country? Hindi na lang sinisisi pa na yung mga doktor who are prescribing for humans, pero we also look at misuse and overuse in animals. And we're very fortunate that here in our country, yung Animal Industry, Bureau of Animal Industry, at saka yung Department of Agriculture has taken on this challenge and working with us here dun sa part ng ICAM-R, interagency. Again, sinasabi ko po sa inyong lahat, there's no time to wait. We need to secure our future natin kasi buhay pa tayo hanggang 2050 at saka the future of our children and their children, so the future generations. We need to really fight this fight of antimicrobial resistance. So, from the global perspective, hindi na lang World Health Organization ang part nito, pati po yung FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, at saka yung OIE, which takes care of the environment. No? They have all united to fight against resistance. So what's needed? Political commitment, good governance, relevant capacity, at saka yung last bullet here is where you are. Collaboration with stakeholders in the private and public sector. So lahat po kayo mga teachers both in private and public schools in both elementary, yung dating elementary and high school and even in higher education. No? So ito po yung parang pinaka main framework of what we're doing now. And this is where you come in. Tayo pong mga teachers, Department of Education, and the entire world of the academe. So we need you to increase awareness and stimulate and encourage behavioral change So part of a strong strategy here is school education and making our youth aware. So yun po yung naging wow natin. Medyo na-postpone lang tayo ng konti, but actually you're really in the core of the activities of the wow that happened this year. So we're very fortunate na we included you here in the new partners. Alam ko naman partner na namin kayo even before, pero mas parang naging very dynamic at saka we felt your commitment this year, no? So we also have, ito po yung top 3, yung 3 bullets before your name, mga academic groups po to. COHUN is Southeast Asian One Health University Network, and PhiloHUN is Philippine One Health University Network. Dami-dami na pong stakeholders and partners, and part of that is really DepEd. So maraming salamat po sa inyong contributions. And I would think magiging part po kayo nitong COHUN, which is in all the countries in Southeast Asia. So may Cambodia HUN, may Indonesian HUN, may Lao HUN, tapos may PhiloHUN and Thai HUN. So it's a big step forward and we're all trying to do this. There's also the group of medical students, no? So imbis na they're fighting other fights, they decided to join us. So it's all about youth against AMR. So ang ganda-ganda po na naging programa nila. And they actually also have a contest that will culminate this Friday, December 10. So again, maraming salamat po. We'd like you to be really actively part of the spread awareness top resistance. So do your part to reduce antibiotic resistance. And in time, lahat po tayo really needs to get involved. Wherever we are in the Philippines, let's all be part of it. Okay? So with that, thank you very much po for your participation and listening to us. If you have any questions after the Q&A, pwede po. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much po, Dr. Berba, for that very informative and significant discussion. I'm sure our live viewers, both in Facebook and in this Zoom platform, have learned so much about antimicrobial resistance and why is it important to combat AMR. And that was a very comprehensive lecture. So thank you again, Dr. Berba. Now, allow me to introduce our next speaker. We are so honored to have Ms. Johanna B. Mallari, Pharmacist 4 of the Pharmaceutical Division of the Department of Health and Program Manager of the DOH Program to Combat Antimicrobial Resistance. Ms. Mallari will be discussing with us how AMR concepts and awareness can be integrated in classroom discussions and assessments for high school learners. So, take it away, Ma'am Do.
Very much, Miss Melaine, for that kind introduction. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, Ma'am Do. Loud and clear po.
So good afternoon to everyone. So again, I am Johanna Mallari and I am privileged to be speaking before you. I am a pharmacist by profession, but I also shared this yesterday. My mom and a lot of my relatives are actually teachers, and I am very proud. I have high admiration for teachers. So I am greatly humbled by this opportunity to present about antimicrobial resistance to our dear teachers. So we sincerely appreciate the Department of Education for your support in this campaign against antimicrobial resistance. So this is the outline of my presentation. So we will first discuss the role of teachers in students' education for antibiotic use. So as earlier during the presentation of Dr. Nina Berba, we learned about the basics of antimicrobial resistance. So in this particular session or topic, I will share with you the material that you can use when discussing about antimicrobial resistance in high school learners. We will also understand more about antimicrobial resistance and how it develops and what are the things that promote the development of antimicrobial resistance or AMR. We will also discuss about the implications of AMR. And of course, aside from knowing the problem, we have to be made aware of the solutions and the practices and behaviors that we can do to slow the progression of antimicrobial resistance. So just to reiterate, we really appreciate that the Department of Education or the education sector is already on board in this fight against antimicrobial resistance. So as we have learned from Dr. Nina Berba earlier, AMR or antimicrobial resistance is a global public health concern. It is a problem not only in the Philippines but all throughout the world. So even in developed countries, problema pa rin po nila yung antimicrobial resistance. No? And one of the identified reasons why we have AMR is because of the misuse and abuse of antibiotics. And as mentioned by Dr. Berba, there is a need for urgent action. No? So we have to act now and we have to act in a coordinated manner, so that we can raise awareness on antimicrobial resistance and we can educate the public and primary professionals about this global public health threat. So we have to make as many people as possible aware of this global health problem, including the misconceptions, the misconceptions about antibiotic use and about antimicrobial resistance. And in this part po, malaki yung role ng mga teachers. No? So learning from early ages the basic concepts about AMR and the correct use of antimicrobials can help to change public awareness and reduce the misuse of these drugs. So we have to correct yung mga misconceptions as early as possible para habang tumatanda po yung bata or yung estudyante, yung learner natin, mas naiintindihan niya and mas nalalaman niya kung ano yung wasto na paraan ng paggamit ng mga antibiotics and antimicrobials in general. So our dear teachers, you have a great role to play in looking for strategies to effectively help the students on the shaping of ideas and on developing attitudes towards the prudent use of antibiotics. But you have to understand, we have to understand that this will not happen overnight. So as if you have heard po from Doc Nina, AMR is a very complex topic that is difficult to understand, especially po kasi very technical din siya. So kahit yung mga adults, mahirap, hindi nila basta-basta maintindihan yung antimicrobial resistance. So what more po yung mga bata natin na learners, no? In this case po yung mga high school learners natin. So it will not happen overnight. So we have to be patient and we have to continuously look for effective strategies on how we can integrate yung concept of AMR in our lessons to our students. So the Department of Health, through the pharmaceutical division, we actually requested for technical assistance from the World Health Organization or the WHO in designing or developing learning materials na pwede po natin gamitin when we integrate AMR in the curriculum. So for this afternoon's presentation, I will be sharing with you yung material that was developed specifically for grade 8 students. No? There's another material for grade 10 and we will share that with the Department of Education as well. So for this particular presentation po, medyo limited kasi yung time natin. So ang i-discuss natin are as follows. We will review what communicable diseases are, how does AMR develop, what promotes the development of AMR, and kung ano yung implications ng AMR to the patient and to the community and society. So what we expect is that our students, through this material that I will be presenting to you, they will be able to explain how AMR develops. They will be able to understand that AMR is a natural phenomenon, okay, na nangyayari po talaga siya every time umiinom tayo ng mga antimicrobials, and they will be able to realize the implications of AMR and kung ano yung magiging effect kapag hindi nila ginagamit ng tama yung mga antimicrobials or yung gamot nila laban sa infection. They will also have to realize that AMR cannot be absolutely prevented. So kasi nga po, natural phenomenon siya. So hindi naman talaga siya natin may eradicate completely. But what we can do is to mitigate yung consequences and yung unintended consequences ng antimicrobial resistance. And then, more importantly, we would like the students to demonstrate good health practices that may reduce the burden and or slow down the spread of antimicrobial resistance. So this is the material po, that you can use. And I will be sharing how you can also discuss kung paano nyo po siya i-explain sa mga students. So, tulad po ng pinakita natin kanina, we have to first explain what antimicrobial resistance is, or AMR. So antimicrobial resistance is a health concern that is complex to explain and understand. Also, as I mentioned earlier po, it can be intimidating. So kapag titignan po natin yung word na antimicrobial resistance, parang kung hindi ka talaga familiar dun sa term, medyo nakaka-intimidate siya. However, if we will try to break down yung root words nitong term na antimicrobial resistance, we can actually see that there are three main key terms involved. So first, let us break down the word antimicrobial. And when we say antimicrobial, pwede natin siyang i-break down into the word anti, which means against, and the word microbial, okay? So pag sinabi po natin microbial, this relates to microorganisms. And our microorganisms include bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. Okay, so yan po yung iba't ibang klase ng mga microorganisms or microbes, or sa layman's term, yung mga germs. And then, yung anti naman, ibig sabihin niya po, di ba, against, or sa Tagalog, laban. So pag pinagsama natin, when put together, combining these two, antimicrobial just means anything that we could use against microorganisms, or against bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. So these are substances, okay, that are present in products that are intended to kill or to control the spread of microorganisms. So kung mapapansin nyo po, yung mga iba't iba na mga antimicrobials, they can be found on medicines that are used to treat infectious diseases, even in household cleaning agents, or yung mga disinfectants natin, they also contain yung mga parang antimicrobial agents na ginagamit panlaban sa mga microorganisms and mga personal hygiene items. Okay, so that's for antimicrobial. Now going to resistance. So the word resistance, on the other hand, in general, it means that this is the ability to prevent something. So magre-resist, para hindi tumalab or hindi maging effective. So when we say antimicrobial resistance, pag pagsasama-samahin na po natin siya, it is essentially the ability of microorganisms. So yun yung mga bacteria, virus, fungi, parasites, to prevent being killed or controlled by antimicrobials. So nagiging resistant sila na hindi natatalab sa kanila yung mga antimicrobials na dapat ay papatay or makaka-inhibit ng growth nila. Okay? So yun po yung meaning ng term natin. So again, they are able to survive, grow, and multiply despite the presence of antimicrobials that would normally kill or inhibit their growth. So because of this antimicrobial resistance, nabuo po yung term na superbug. Okay? So yung, I think na-mention na rin to ni Dr. Bakaya, no? So some of the concepts here were already discussed earlier. It's just that this time po, ito yung mga talagang concepts na i-introduce natin sa mga high school learners natin. So yung mga high school learners naman na kasi natin, we assume that they already have this understanding of technical concepts. Kaya when we introduce the concept of antimicrobial resistance to them, ito po yung paraan na may maunawaan na rin nila. Yung magsisimula na silang makita yung mga technical concepts related to antimicrobial resistance. So when we say superbug, it is a term used to refer to resistant pathogenic microorganisms, especially bacteria. Okay? So yung tulad nga po nung nabanggit kanina, no, yung superbugs, result sila ng natural process of evolution. So it is important to remember that most microbes, yung mga microbes po, yung microorganisms that we discussed earlier, they are living organisms. And therefore, as living organisms, they are capable of adapting to the environmental conditions that they are subjected to. So kapag na-subject po sila, na-expose sila sa mga antimicrobials, initially, kapag first time nila na makikita yon, magiging effective po yung mga gamot, no? Kasi nga, they are designed to kill those microorganisms or microbes. Pero kapag improper yung use natin ng mga gamot na to and hindi mamatay lahat ng microorganism na nag-cause ng infection, yung mga natira na hindi namatay, matatalino po yung mga yan, sabi nga ni Dr. Berba. So they are very matalino. They can develop mechanisms to resist yung mga agents na ginagamit natin panlaban sa kanila the next time that they encounter those agents. So at this point, let us have a review on communicable diseases. And it is important that our high school learners first have a review on communicable diseases kasi dito po papasok, dito magsisimula, no? Yung pagkakaroon ng infection or communicable disease, doon po magsisimula yung possible na exposure or risk natin to antimicrobial resistance. And itong mga concepts po na ito, they can be integrated sa, I think, sa high school or sa K-12 po. Meron pa ring subject na MAPE, no? So yung sa health component ng MAPE, pwede po siyang i-insert doon. Pwede rin sa science subjects natin, siguro sa mga biology subjects. So, this can be inserted po doon, no? Yung mga discussing about health, human health. So let us have a review of communicable diseases. And when we say communicable diseases, these are diseases that are caused by infectious agents that are transmitted to other people from an infected person, animal, or other source in the environment. So yung mga communicable diseases or infectious diseases, ito po yung mga nakakahawa ng mga sakit. So tulad ng COVID-19, for example. So COVID-19 is a communicable disease that can be transmitted from one person to another through mechanism of transmission niya is airborne or aerosols. So yun po, no? Nakakahawa siya kapag na-expose ka sa isang infected na tao or possible din na may animal to human na infection, na transmission of infection, yun po yung mga zoonotic diseases, no? Or other sources in the environment. So yun yung ating communicable diseases. And we have to review the concept of, from this definition, may mga nabanggit po dyan, infectious agent, and then yung transmission. So kung i-break down po natin yan, isa-isahin natin, when we talk about infectious agent or yung pathogen, causative agent, siya yung nagkakos nung disease or nung infection. Okay, so yung mga infectious agents natin, sila yung mga microorganisms or microbes. So they are able to cause disease or infection. And when we say bacteria, ito yung mga unicellular prokaryotic organisms. So example po ng mga bacteria natin, mga Staphylococcus, Streptococcus. So yung mga nagkakos ng pneumonia, ng mga UTI, And then virus are small acellular organisms, no? They are not considered to be living. Parang dependent po kasi sila sa host. Kailangan naka-attach sila sa isang host para mabuhay sila, no? An example of a virus is the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which causes COVID-19 infection. So fungi naman are eukaryotes, which may be unicellular. Such an example of a fungi na unicellular is yeast. And pwede rin na multicellular. So yung multicellular na fungi, examples of this are molds or mushrooms. So yung mga tumutubong molds sa mga tinapay, for example, na hindi kinain for a week or so, fungi po yun. No? And then parasites. So parasites are organisms that live and feed on or in another organism that causes harm to its host. So examples of parasites are yung mga parasite that cause malaria, and there are different types of parasite. So itong mga infectious agent na to, they are the ones that cause the infection. And when we look at the elements of the chain of infection, nandyan yung disease agent, so yun yung infectious agent that we just discussed. And then yung reservoir, when we say reservoir, these are places, no, in the environment. So pwedeng tao, hayop, na possible na dun tumira and mag-multiply yung microorganisms or microbes or yung pathogens. So another example of reservoir is yung soil, water, people. So for example po, yung mga worms, di ba? Ang reservoir nila habang nagpapalaki sila ay nagpaparami sila, yung ibang types ng worms, yung mga infective na form ng worm nasa soil, okay? And then minsan yung tao nga reservoir ng infection. So for example, nagka-COVID po, infected ka ngayon and you can serve as a reservoir kasi nandoon sa iyo yung virus and nagmumultiply sa iyo yung virus. So when another person comes in contact with that COVID, with that person na may COVID, pwede siyang makahawa. Okay? And then yung portal of exit is the way that the infectious agent leaves the reservoir to spread to others. So for example po, since nasa COVID pandemic tayo, gamitin na natin example ng COVID. So yung mga portal of exit ng SARS-CoV virus is yun nga yung mga through saliva, yung mga bodily secretions po ng saliva, sipon, so yan. Na mag-exit sa nose or sa mouth. So yun po yung mga portal of exit. And then yung mode of transmission, so yung mode of transmission, this is how the disease agent is spread or passed on from one person to another. So transmission can be direct kapag nagkaroon ng direct contact. Indirect contact is, for example, in the case of COVID, inubo siya sa kamay, tapos humawak siya ng doorknob, tapos hindi na-disinfect yung doorknob na yun. So kahit hindi siya directly nag-come in contact with another person, pero kung yung another person na yun ay hinawakan din yung doorknob na nahawakan ng COVID-19 infected person, pwede pa rin niyang makuha yung sakit from there. So pwede rin pong ingestion. So there are some infection that we acquire from eating infected food. And inhalation, so yun nga, yung pag naamoy natin siya or na-inhale natin siya from the air, yun yung mga different modes of transmission. Yung portal of entry naman po, so kung may portal of exit, meron ding portal of entry, and yung portal of entry is the way that the agent enters the body. So pwedeng respiratory, so sa mga airborne diseases, respiratory, gastrointestinal, so yung, kasi di ba po meron tayong mode of transmission na ingestion, so yung portal of entry niya ay sa gastrointestinal system, and then genitourinary. And yung susceptible host is the person who is at risk for developing an infection. And a person becomes more susceptible to developing an infection kapag po compromised yung immunity or yung resistensya ng person. So how does AMR develop? So paano ba nagde-develop yung AMR? So this is important to understand kasi from understanding the cycle and how it develops, makikita natin saan tayo pwedeng mag-inject ng interventions in order to prevent the emergence and spread of antimicrobial resistance. So this is the cycle po, no? Ito yung kung paano siya nagde-develop, and we will go to each number or step one by one. So first is infection. So nagkakaroon ng infection. So this the infection or infective stage is the stage when the infectious agent, so again po, no, yung infectious agent ay yung na-discuss natin kanina ng mga microorganisms or microbes. Ito yung kapag na-infect ka, nag-enter na dun sa host's body yung infectious agent. And may mga iba't ibang ways by which mag-enter sa host's body. So may mga portal of entry, dun po papasok yung concept ng portal of entry and yung mga transmission, no? So how the disease or the infectious agent is transmitted. So in that way, we get infected. So kapag nagkaroon ng infection, usually po, hindi naman yan agad-agad magmamanifest. So meron po tayong tinatawag na incubation period, no? So dadaan pa yan ng proliferation. So proliferation is the stage when the infectious agent, say for example, bacteria or say SARS-CoV-2 virus, nag-enter na siya ng katawan, tapos magpaparami muna siya. So magmumultiply po muna siya, magpaparami sila. May mga mechanism sila para mag-multiply, para magparami. Because they need to reach a certain point or number po, no, dun sa population ng mga pathogens inside the body before magkaroon ng manifestation ng signs and symptoms. And yun yung next na mangyayari. Yung kapag magkakaroon na ng illness. So kapag itong mga pathogens na to, so marami na sila enough inside the body, nag-multiply na sila, nag-replicate na sila, dun na magkakaroon ng, kasi po magre-react yung immune system natin. So we have natural immunity, and kapag may mga outsiders, invaders, no, mga antigens that enter the body, so nag-a-act po yung immune system natin. So kapag mag-a-act na siya against dun sa mga antigen, maglalaban na sila, nagkakaroon na ng mga clinical manifestations, no? So possible manifestations include yung mga cough and colds, fever, so yung mga illness na po, yung the person already feels ill, parang may sakit na talaga, yung masama na yung pakiramdam niya. Okay, and then syempre po kapag nagkasakit tayo, we will seek medical assistance, or we know that we have to make management or we have to manage the illness. So we have to take medicines, we have to consult a doctor. So infections, they are managed through proper diagnosis by a physician along with correct use of antimicrobial. So for example, the cause of your disease is, or yung illness is an infectious agent. So pwede po na mag-prescribe yung doctor ng antimicrobial agent, no? And infections are best managed and cured once there is correct diagnosis, which allows to choose an effective antimicrobial treatment. So some diseases, they are best managed without the use of antimicrobial drugs. So for example po, there are some viral infection, no? So, or mga infection caused by viruses that can be self-limiting. Ibig sabihin po, magre-resolve sila on their own. Basta palakasin lang nung person yung katawan niya, kumain siya ng tama, magpahinga siya, magre-resolve siya on its own. But yung mga ibang sakit naman po or illness, kakailanganin talaga ng gamot. Kaya po, kailangan kumonsulta sa doktor para malaman kung ano yung appropriate management dun sa illness. And then, so dun po sa cycle natin, actually, tama na po sana yun, no? Parang, okay, na-infect, nagkasakit, and then minanage yung sakit. Pero saan po papasok si antimicrobial resistance? So actually po, kung na-manage correctly yung sakit, gagaling yung pasyente, no? So babalik na siya sa normal health with appropriate management, the person will fully recover from the infection. So saan po papasok yung antimicrobial resistance. Balikan lang po natin yung slide. So again, kapag improper po yung paggamit natin ng mga gamot, particularly ng mga antimicrobials, pwede pong mag-occur yung antimicrobial resistance. So this is when microorganisms evolve when they are exposed to antimicrobials, which in turn make the drugs ineffective. So this was explained, this figure, image was explained by Dr. Nina Berba earlier, and we can try to explain din po to our students, just to make them, to have them visualize paano ba nangyayari nga ba yun. So, pwede po nating i-explain din sa kanila yon, no? So, infections, kapag may antimicrobial resistance na, dahil nga po hindi na gumagana yung mga gamot na meron tayo dun sa infection nila, nagpe-persist yung infection dun sa body, and there is an increased risk of spreading infection to others. So, antimicrobial drugs, they are able to kill the susceptible bacteria. So yung mga bacteria na baguhan pa lang and hindi pa sila na-expose before dun sa mga antimicrobials, mamamatay po talaga sila kasi yun naman po talaga yung action ng mga antimicrobial agents natin. However, kapag meron silang mga kasama na resistant na, ibig sabihin nag-develop na po sila ng mechanisms of resistance, may iwan po sila, no? May iwan sila dun sa katawan, yung mga resistant bacteria. And some can evolve and pass their resistance onto other bacteria. And in that way, the resistant bacteria also multiplies. So how does it spread? So yun nga po, kapag nagkaroon na ng resistant na mga microorganisms, they can be spread in the environment, through people, no, and even with animals po. So pwede silang mag-spread through exchange of genetic material. So may mga ginagawa po yan, no, ng mga ways na mag-share sila ng genetic material, yung resistant genes nila. So they share with other bacteria, neighboring bacteria, para mahawaan nila yung katabi nilang bacteria na maging resistant din. Pwede rin na through circulation of food and then water and the environment. And transmission can also be influenced by trade and travel. So knowing then how AMR develops, what are the things that promotes the development of AMR? So may mga ginagawa po kasi tayo na practices din na nakaka-contribute. But just so you also know po, AMR is actually a natural phenomenon. So it is the natural tendency of microorganisms to evolve. So as explained earlier, microorganisms are living organisms and they have this way to adapt, to evolve to their environment. So kumbaga po, naturally talaga, mangyayari talaga siya. Kapag na-expose yung katawan or yung mga microorganisms na to sa antimicrobial agents, they will really develop tendency na mag-evolve and they will cause it to adapt, to develop resistance. So yun nga po, no, they have ways such as transfer of resistant genes or mga mutations. So kumbaga po, natural phenomenon talaga siya. That's why I said earlier, hindi talaga natin siya completely may eradicate. However, there are some practices that we do in the human health sector, even in the animal health sector or in the environment sector, na nagpapabilis nung pag-develop, nung pag-emerge ng antimicrobial resistance. And this include irrational use of antimicrobials. So irrational use is the inappropriate use of antimicrobials. So this is one of the most common causes of antimicrobial resistance. And this may be attributed to the use of medicines by healthcare professionals with the use of wrong medicine. So kapag mali yung diagnosis ng disease, no? So akala niya bacterial infection yun pala viral lang. Tapos binigyan siya ng antibiotic pero viral infection lang pala. So inaccurate dispensing of medicines and inaccurate administration of medicines, or yung wrong dose. So ito po yung kapag hindi natin kinokompleto, no, yung treatment regimen natin, kulang yung iniinom natin, or nag-overdose or underdose, wrong indication, so use of antibacterials for viral or fungal infections, self-medication, so yan, very rampant po yan dito sa Philippines. So we self-medicate, we buy antibiotics without prescriptions. Buti na lang ngayon, sabi nga po ni Dr. Berba, one of the most parang naging impactful na policy that we have is yung no prescription, no dispensing policy. Para hindi basta-basta makakabili ng mga antimicrobials na walang reseta. And then, ginagawa din po ito sa mga barangay, sa mga community, yung borrowing of prescriptions that are intended for another patient. Failure to complete therapy, so yan yung mga therapeutic inadherence to therapy, no? So, skipping or forgetting doses, o kaya kapag diniscontinue na yung pag-take ng gamot. So, for example po, the doctor prescribed amoxicillin for 7 days, 3 times a day. Tapos on the 3rd or 4th day, the patient already feels better. So kala niya, wala na siyang sakit. Titigil na niya yung pag-take ng antibiotics. So hindi niya alam, meron pa palang natitirang mga micro or bacteria, for example, dun sa system niya na hindi completely napatay kasi nga po, diniscontinue yung pag-take ng gamot. Or discontinuation then due to financial incapacity. So this is also one of our concern, no? Yung access po. Some of our fellows, it's not that they don't want to complete their treatment regimen. It's just that they don't have enough resources, no, to buy medicine. So they will prioritize yung pagbili ng pagkain kaysa po na pumili sila ng gamot pang treat dun sa illness nila. And then failure to follow through after failed therapy. So yung iba, kahit na hindi na nga tumalab yung gamot, hindi pa sila magpapa-follow up check-up with a physician. Another way by which which promotes the development of AMR, another problem po ito, no? So yung problem natin sa human health sector, yung mga misuse, abuse of antimicrobials, and this also happens in the animal health sector. So we understand that even in the animal health sector, they are using antimicrobials sometimes in subtherapeutic doses. So hindi lang naman po kasi mga tao yung nagkakaroon ng infections. So even animals, they can also get sick, di ba po? Nagkakaroon din sila ng infection. And when they have infections, kinagamitan din sila ng mga antimicrobials. And if familiar po kayo or narinig nyo na, minsan, yung mga antimicrobials, ginagamit ng mga livestock stakeholders or farmers as growth promoters. Parang ginagamit nila na vitamins ng mga alaga nilang hayop. So which is incorrect po, no? Hindi po yun tama. That's why we are working together with the Department of Agriculture. So this campaign against antimicrobial resistance is not only done by the Department of Health, but all involved sectors have to be on board kasi nga po important yung role. No? This needs one health approach. So no single sector can do it alone para labanan natin itong AMR in our country. So in the animal health sector, they launched the campaign, I Am Responsible. So yung I Am Responsible somewhat engages yung mga veterinary stakeholders to be responsible in the use of antimicrobials sa mga alaga nilang hayop. Another way which promotes yun nga po, yung lack of quality medicine. So sometimes yung poor access kasi nga po walang pambili or hindi available yung specific gamot na kailangan nila dun sa pharmacies or hospitals. Very common din po ito sa mga rural areas, no, sa mga probinsya na kung saan possible na hindi available yung kailangan nila na gamot. Meron din pong mga suboptimal drug concentration. So ito po yung nangyayari pag may mga counterfeit medicines tayo, yung mga pekeng gamot na suboptimal or subtherapeutic, hindi enough yung content ng gamot to elicit the desired optimal health outcome or poor quality rin ng drug products. So lahat po yun nag-contribute sa nagpa-promote ng development of AMR. And then poor infection prevention and control. So why is it very important, no, yung infection prevention and control? Kasi in the first place po, hindi naman natin kakailanganin ng antimicrobials kung wala tayong infection. So bago pa man magkaroon ng infection, bago mo pa man kailanganing uminom ng antimicrobials, iwasan mo na magkaroon ng infection. So hindi po very relevant pa rin po yung prevention is better than cure. So if we have poor infection prevention practices, so for example, if we lack clean water systems, especially in provincial areas where there is high prevalence of diarrhea, so this actually promote the development of AMR. Another is yung weak surveillance system. So if we do not have enough capacity to monitor, to regularly collect and report relevant data on drug resistance, kung walang government support to monitor our resistance patterns, so that also promotes the development of AMR. And then insufficient investments on new research in developing new antibiotics. So yung antimicrobial resistance, ang bilis po niyang kumalat, pero yung mga tools or mga medicines na gagamitin natin panlaban sa AMR, nagde-decline. So yung mga new antibiotics that are being introduced in the market, they are declining. And ang tagal po ng research na mag-develop ng mga bagong antibiotics. So in that way, dahil po doon, we have less number of agents to combat infections, therefore increasing resistance rates of pathogens over the years, and it becomes more problematic for us to treat common infectious diseases. So what are the implications? Having understood that AMR is a global health problem and we have practices that promote the development of AMR, ano yung magiging implications to us as an individual and to the community as a whole? So dun sa patient, yung impact po ng AMR, resistance to treatment, in some of the most common infections in the world, increasing use of older, less effective techniques in controlling infections, and increasing burden of caring for the individuals, their families, and society. So kasi nga po, since ineffective na yung mga gamot na meron tayo, mas tatagal yung gamutan and mas magiging magastos. So example po, yung mga most common childhood diseases, especially in developing countries, they can no longer be cured with older antibiotics kapag naging resistant na sila. And some surgical operations, so yung mga surgical operations po kasi usually after surgery ginagamitan ng mga antibiotics kasi yung mga site ng surgery or surgical operation, prone po yun to infection. So usually ibigyan niya ng mga antibiotics. O yung cancer chemotherapy, so lalo po kasi sa mga chemo patients, nagiging down yung immunity nila. So nagkakaroon ng opportunity for some microorganisms to infect those cancer patients. So kapag may AMR tayo, the available antimicrobial agents that we have will become less safe. This surgical operations and cancer chemotherapy will become less safe kasi nga wala na po tayong effective antibiotics. And then ineffective antimicrobials may result to longer courses and more expensive treatment, and the person will become sick for longer and mas increase din yung risk for death kung wala nang gagamitin pang gamot dun sa infection. Ano naman po yung impact sa community? So yun po kasi yung ng AMR. Hindi lang ikaw yung apektado, kundi pati na rin yung buong community. So dahil nga po mas mahihirapan i-treat yung mga infection, tataas yung morbidity and mortality. So mas magsispread yung mga resistant pathogens, and this can result to higher morbidity or yung number po ng mga nagkakaroon ng sakit, and higher mortality or yung risk po ng pagkamatay. And then increased resource utilization. So yun nga po, as I mentioned earlier, possible na magkaroon ng risk of longer hospitalization, and kapag din po kasi ineffective na yung mga first line antimicrobial agents natin, usually mag-move po yan sa second line, sa third line, and yung mga higher level of antibiotics, aside sa medyo mas may mga toxic side effects sila, mas mamahal din sila. So magkakaroon po talaga ng increased spending, increased resource utilization. And then we will need to alter our guidelines. So we have to alter our guidelines to match or to correlate po no dun sa existing resistance patterns that we observe. So for example, if before ang first line is penicillin, kung mataas na yung resistance dun sa penicillin, hindi na siya gaganan dun sa mga infections kung saan siya ginagamit before. So kakailangan nila ng ibang gamot na i-identify natin or i-recommend as first line. So we need to continuously update and revise our guidelines for empiric therapy. But the good thing about AMR is that we can do something. So there are behaviors we have learned earlier. Ano yung mga nagpa-promote ng AMR? So what we can do is to intervene para pigilan or iwasan yung mga bagay na yon na nagpa-promote ng AMR para ma-decrease or ma-slow down yung progression ng AMR. So hindi po siya completely may eradicate, but at least we can slow down its progression and we can mitigate its impact. So what are the things that we can do? So first is avoiding infection by proper hygiene. So we have to reiterate to our learners yung importance of proper hygiene, yung washing of hands, keeping the environment clean, and then cooking food thoroughly. So may mga iba po kasing microorganisms na nag-grow sa pagkain, and some kapag hindi niluto ng tama, maaring nandun pa po pala siya dun sa chicken, for example. So yung chicken, usually yung mga microorganism dyan, salmonella. So kapag hindi mo niluto thoroughly yung chicken, maaring meron pala siyang salmonella doon na magkakos ng infection. And very important po and timely as well is yung vaccinations. Vaccination in order to prevent vaccine preventable diseases. No? So para maiwasan yung pagkakaroon ng infection. Next, so yan po, proper hygiene, washing of hands. This decreases the likelihood of transmission. And then vaccination, this is a very important primary mode of prevention of infectious diseases. Clean environment, the reason why we want to have a clean environment is para ma-avoid po yung proliferation or yung pagpaparami, pag-spread ng mga microorganisms and yung vectors nila. So for example po, sa case ng dengue is a viral infection, and dengue is, ang vector po ng dengue virus ay mga mosquitoes. So kung wala yung mosquitoes in the environment, man-reduce din yung risk na magkaroon ng dengue infection. So may mga ganun po, no? Ma-eliminate yung reservoir nila kapag papanatilihin po nating malinis yung environment. And then proper food preparation. So yun nga po, no? Aside from avoiding infections, kapag naman hindi na naiwasan and na-infect na talaga yung pasyente, what we can do is to manage properly yung communicable disease by consulting a physician in order to effectively and correctly diagnose yung disease and kung ano man yung kakailanganin na gamot to manage it. And then proper etiquette. So kapag po inuubo or nagsisneeze, make sure to cover the mouth, face away from other people. So yung mga high school learners natin, lalo na po no, kapag dati before sa mga face-to-face lesson, school, face-to-face na mga classes. So lagi po yung mga kumpulan, may mga barka-barkada sila. So sometimes yung mga ganitong etiquette, no, nakakalimutan po nila. So kailangan po nating i-reiterate sa kanila yung importance of proper etiquette. So make sure to cover the mouth and nose when sneezing or coughing, face away from other people, and as much as possible kapag may nararamdaman na po na karamdaman, avoid close contact. So this will decrease the likelihood of transferring or makahawa po ng ibang tao. And then quarantine. So ito po actually, mas nakita natin ngayon no, with COVID-19 pandemic, yung importance of proper etiquette and yung pagka-quarantine para ma-avoid yung transmission ng mga highly contagious diseases. So we have to be responsible kapag may nararamdaman na and possible na nakakahawa ito, mag-isolate na po, no? Or i-quarantine na yung sarili to monitor kung mag-develop or mag-progress yung symptoms. And of course, more important, very important, yung responsible use of antimicrobials. So first and foremost, we should only use antimicrobials when prescribed. So we have to reiterate to our learners na wag basta-basta uminom ng antibiotic nang hindi ko makonsulta sa doktor, and wag i-share yung prescription, wag mag-self-medicate, no? Very important po na itanim natin yun sa mga utak ng mga learners po natin, no, na hindi sila dapat mag-self-medicate and wag sila basta-basta uminom ng antibiotics or antimicrobials. Compliance to treatment, so kapag may infection and niresetahan ng antibiotics or ng antimicrobials, mag-comply po kung paano siya nireseta ng doktor. Finish therapy, so pag sinabing 7 days, tatapusin yung 7 days. Pag sinabing 3 days, may iba po kasing antibiotics na good for 3 days. Depende po siya kung ano yung nirekomenda ng doktor. Correct dose, make sure to take the appropriate dose as prescribed by the physician and avoid skipping doses to ensure effective treatment. Never share. So, yun nga po, no, yung prescription sharing. So sometimes, akala nung iba, parang good intention naman na i-share nila, no. So kunwari po si Marites ay narinig niya sa kapitbahay niya na yung anak ng kapitbahay niya ay inuubo. So sasabihin niya na, yan din yung naging sakit ng anak ko, tas ito yung ginamit niya. So i-share niya yung prescription or yung natirang gamot na dun sa hindi pagpubos ng gamutan ng anak niya. So, good po yung intention, pero ang isi-share po natin instead na prescription and unused antimicrobials is yung correct information about how to take antimicrobials responsibly. So, what we can share to them is to consult the doctor and to wash hands, no, ensure vaccinate. So, yung mga ganong information po ang pwedeng i-share. Pero yung pag-share ng prescription and pag-share ng unused antimicrobials, no po yan. And in summary, just to summarize all that we have discussed, antimicrobial resistance is the ability of microbes to resist the effects of drugs. And this makes them stronger, no? Kapag po, what doesn't kill you make you stronger. So kung hindi sila namatay the first time, magde-develop sila ng ways para mas maging stronger the next time na makaharap nila yung antimicrobial agent na yun. Although some people are at greater risk than others, no one can completely avoid the risk of antibiotic-resistant infection. So wala po itong pinipili, mapa-mayaman, mapa-mahirap, mapa-developed countries, developing countries. Nandyan po yung problem of antimicrobial resistance. Infections with resistant organisms are difficult to treat and requires costly, sometimes toxic alternatives. However, pinaka-important to note and key takeaway for our learners is that it can be prevented. And how can we prevent it? Through proper hygiene and sanitation, clean environments, vaccination and proper nutrition, and through following the advice of our healthcare professionals. So we would like to again reiterate that there is no time to wait. We should act now and we should act urgently. AMR affects our families, communities, and our future generations. So we have to act together. Everyone can be a steward for the future. So whether that be a farmer, healthcare provider, businessman, parent, no, or ikaw anak, yung mga learners. So lahat po tayo may role to play in this fight against antimicrobial resistance. So we enjoin everyone to be stewards for the future. Later, we will ask you to take the pledge to fight antimicrobial resistance. So that's all for my presentation po. Thank you very much for your kind attention. And if you have any questions, you can email us at amr@doh.gov.ph. Thank you very much, and over to you, Ms. Mylene.
thank you, Ms. Mallari, for that very interesting discussion on how our high school learners should be taught about antimicrobial resistance. I am certain that our participants, both here in the Zoom platform and in our Facebook Live, have gained significant insights about your talk or from your talk. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Berba and Ma'am Mallari, for sharing your expertise for about antimicrobial resistance to our participants this afternoon. So before we commence this insightful webinar, again, we will be having a short Q&A where our esteemed resource speakers will be answering queries from our live audience. To our live audience from the Zoom platform, you may raise your hand or your virtual hand here for you to be acknowledged, and then we will be requesting you to unmute. To our Facebook Live viewers, again, as we have discussed earlier, as mentioned earlier, your queries and questions should have been typed in the comment section of our Facebook Live during the discussion. So I think we have the first question here, and it's from one of our Facebook Live viewer. This, I think, is directed to Dr. Berba. Yes? Yeah. Dr. Berba, good afternoon po. Question lang po, ano po ba ang pinagkaiba ng mga generics na antibiotics doon po sa branded? Kasi po minsan natatakot po kaming bumili ng generic na gamot dahil may specific brand po na prescribe si doctor.
Oo. Bali, actually, we do have a generics act, no? And in theory, yung mga generic brands should be equivalent to the branded products also. So sa mga antibiotics, pagka may prescribe si doctor, actually, the prescription should have a generic, tapos pwedeng maglagay ng brand kung may preferred brand. Pero kayo bilang consumer, you also have the option to choose any of the brands. Basta tamang generic at saka tamang dose yung if-follow nyo according to the prescription.
Okay. Thank you po, Dr. Berba, for that insightful answer to this query. Next question po, I think either Ma'am Do or Dr. Berba could answer. Ano ba itong, okay. So the question po came from our Facebook Live viewer as well. The question is, kung ang prescribed po na dose ay 500 mg, then pwede po ba kami bumili ng dalawang 250 milligrams para makomplete po yung isang 500 mg capsule? Yun po yung usual na tanong po kasi ng mga bata.
Ako sasagot do ha. So kung 500 milligrams yung dose na prescribe, pwede na 250 para to meet the 500. Kaya lang kung ano kasi yon, tableta or maybe suspension, 250 per 5 ml. Parang mas marami siyang iinumin eh. Tapos baka mas mahal din. Baka yung isang 250 times 2, baka mas mahal yun than 1,500. So make the computation. Tsaka yung mga children, mahirap nga po sila painumin eh. Kaya kung pwedeng isang tablet lang, mas mabuti or mas kaunti yung volume na iinumin nila. So make the computations na and try to decide.
Opo. I think this question po kasi is from one of our viewers na medyo nasa remote area na yung access nila sa gamot ay hindi ganun ka wide. So may mga certain doses lang na available sa pharmacy na malapit po sa kanila. So I think yun lang po because some of the questions are already similar with the previous ones. To our Zoom platform participants po, please feel free to raise questions or to ask Dr. Berba and Ma'am Do, should you have any more queries or should you have any more questions about the discussion a while ago. So I am not seeing any virtual hand. Wag po tayong mahiya. Baka po meron po tayong tanong. Samantalahin po natin na nandito po sila. Ang ating mga esteemed and competent resource speakers from DOH. Okay. Mukhang wala na pong tanong. Dr. Berba and Ma'am Do? So maraming salamat po Dr. Berba and Ma'am Dove, or for sure because of the very comprehensive discussion na cover na halos lahat ng mga pwedeng maitanong ng ating Facebook Live viewers. So that ends our Q&A session. And again, before we end everyone, before we end this session, we invite everyone to please take your pledge as stewards for the future by going to the link flashed on the screen or by scanning the QR code to be shown in the video.
Hello, my name is Dr. Takeshi Kasai. I'm the World Health Organization Regional Director for the Western Pacific. It is World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, and I want to talk to you about why we need to work together to tackle antimicrobial resistance. When we overuse and misuse antibiotics, antiviral, antifungal, and antiparasitic medicines, infection become harder and sometimes impossible to treat. This is a very serious threat to all of us. If we allow antimicrobial resistance to keep growing, minor injuries and simple surgeries could become very dangerous. Thank you for your solidarity and support. It's helping to make the Western Pacific safe and healthy for the 1.9 billion of us who call this region home and for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Saan? Sa AMRU. Maging staff na siya ng AMRU.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the conclusion of the last part of our two-part webinar. To our viewers, if you're going to share your thoughts, takeaways, or selfies relative to today's episode, we highly encourage you to include our official hashtags in your posts, and you can see these hashtags on your screen. We would be more than happy to see your posts on the different virtual platforms. Just a gentle reminder as well to everyone, kindly fill out the evaluation form using the link or the QR code shown on the screen. The form will contain content evaluation questions about today's episode. And you need to get at least 60% correct answers for you to receive a certificate of participation. We will already start releasing certificates to eligible participants within this week. Thank you once again for joining us this afternoon, and thank you to our resource speakers for their very informative and insightful discussion. Stay safe and healthy, and God bless us all.